At the Dawes Arboretum, pretty much due east of Columbus, Ohio, we have a Torreya taxifolia. Provenance came from Lee Barnes. I'll have to look at the year, but I'm pretty sure these came from the Biltmore Gardens, 2006. And here's the Torreya taxifolia, and looks very characteristic. It's mid-May right now, and so the buds, the vegetative buds, have already really splayed out. You can see the lighter green, that they're definitely growing well. Here you can see there's a terminal bud that's starting to shoot up, so this is very good growth. Both the terminal going vertical and the laterals look like they were doublets, and there's a triplet, I can't tell if, yeah, another triplet there. So let's take a look at the height of each of the years in here, and I would estimate that at about 3.5 inches from the top whorl to the second whorl, and it's still a green stem, so that means it was probably year before last growth. Went up year before last, and last year had that lateral come out. Below that we have, wow, look at the growth of that. It's brown, so maybe 2 years before that. I would estimate that to be 8 inches or so, and down to a third whorl. Below that it gets a little hazy as to how it works. You can see a second viable stem on the left, very characteristic of Torreys. It has a whorl coming out. See if there's a terminal in here. Is there a terminal? I don't think so. Very characteristic. It'll just have it in waiting and also use the photosynthetic capacity of that. So this is the Torreya taxifolia, delivered from Torreya Guardians. Let's take a look at the canopy and where it's at. Okay, so here we are. First thing I want to show is this gigantic red oak, it looks like, or is it a white oak? White oak, gigantic white oak right here. Tremendous shade of the canopy that it has. You can see some very characteristic lush, moist plants here. If I look up at the canopy straight up, we're definitely covered by the white oak. We've got little Japanese maple here, which is useful because all species of Acer have the same symbiotic fungi as Torreya. Now we have a second specimen of Torreya taxifolia right next to it. So here's the one that we just looked at. My estimate would be that's a little over 2 feet tall, maybe 2.5 feet tall. This one's slightly smaller. Let's take a look at it. Top down. Top down, we have a small vertical green terminal coming out of it. So later this summer, maybe it will be shooting up a vertical. 4 of the branches on the whorls, each of them has a triplet vegetative bud coming out. So that is quite wonderful. Let's take a look as well. So it's basically on the same yearly sequence. This one went up a little less, looks like maybe 3 inches to me, below the top whorl. It's green, so maybe 2 years ago it went up. Maybe 2 years before that, a little less than the other one. Maybe 4.5, 5 inches. And then this lower part, that might have been while it was still in the greenhouse being nurtured before it was planted out. Looks like it's doing very well. Does have one side stem there. Oh, okay, which also has a little green terminal bud coming out of its whorl there. You can see that right in the center of the photo. A green terminal bud. Very, very healthy. Triplets coming out of that as well. Amazing, this close to an oak, I think a white oak, and here's looking up into the canopy straight from there. Alright, so from these two Torreya taxifolia here at the Dawes Arboretum, we walk over and you see here slightly darker green, very different leaf structure. This is Torreya grandis. I'll show the tag in a moment. But this has more of a curvature to it. Just as prickly, but more of a curvature to it. Very shiny green. What's interesting here, though, is look at the different timing of the vegetative growth. You see nothing expanded of the vegetational buds. Nothing expanded. So here we are on the side here. I'm going in to take a look. A little triplet vegetational bud, not expanded in the slightest. Now the shape of these, to me, they look like rooted branchlets. And that's because the rooted branchlets still think they're a branch, and they will not send up a center stem and grow into a tall tree. This is often what happens to these kinds. The same with ginkgo. It's very difficult if you try to root a male branch to get it into a nice vertical shape. This one here as well, I can't tell if it came from the same or if it's two different ones. Probably the same. But you can see a very different structure. The leaflets look pretty healthy, but it's just amazing that they have not expanded yet. Here between, you can see it went out quite a ways, still green from there. I estimate that at about 6 or 7 inches. And right at the whorl, you can see some vegetative buds in there that will be growing more vegetative growth out, but just a really haphazard growth form here. Very curved compared to the Torreya taxifolia. Now, also, not nearly as white underneath. Let's get a close-up here, and then I'll go back to the taxifolia again and try to take a look at the distinction there. But you can see the curvature. It just feels different too. Very different curvature. Before I go back to the taxifolia and look at the underneath there, surely it was the provenance of the Biltmore. Let me get over here and get down to where we can see that tag. It's Chinese Torreya. Torreya grandis. Chinese nutmeg yew. So boy, if I see these two together, it's very distinct to me who's who. Let's take a look at the underside of taxifolia here and see what the color of the leaflets look like. Okay, these are the same. I don't see any distinction in the color. It's lighter, but not a white. It's at this stage of the year, it's just a lighter color. So here we are, Dawes Arboretum. Let's continue on and see what we can find. This is a Cephalotaxus, a Chinese plum yew. From a distance, it might look like a Torreya, and it also has the underlying 2 white lines underneath that Torreya have. But what's really obvious is you cannot do this with a Torreya. You can do it with a yew, a taxus, a Cephalotaxus, but not with a Torreya. So this is an Asian conifer. Also has a very fleshy aril over the seed. I can't remember if it's a single seed or several, but it's a very close relative, but it's an Asian Cephalotaxus, very closely related. Here's a Torreya nucifera at a very different part of the Dawes Arboretum. So instead of from China, it's still an Asian species, but it comes from Japan. And when we take a look at it, it also has a very dark green shiny branchlets, curved like the Torreya grandis is. But we can't tell anything about tree form because, again, this one looks like it's a rooted branchlet. It's got branches going off in two directions here. Here's a main one, but it's not producing any terminal vertical growth because, as a conifer, it still thinks it's a branch on a bigger tree, and it's doing what a branch should, growing horizontally, not vertically. Now what's interesting here is it has already leafed out its new growth for the year, not as much as the taxifolia was doing, but certainly more than the Chinese Torreya was doing near the taxifolia at the previous site. You can see it's got some expanded branchlets there, but again, no terminal growth. Very kind of curved leaflets on it. I, for one, would not be able to tell the distinction between this and the grandis. I just want to show that they've encased this nucifera inside a cage. We know that deer find the branchlets very attractive for rubbing velvet off of antlers. But I also want to show what the canopy above it looks like. This is a pure conifer forest area here, so it will not be as dark in the summer as the other Torreyas are under. You can see it, very interesting Asian species. I have no idea what that is, but it's a conifer of some sort. So it won't get as much sun in the late fall, early spring, winter as the pure deciduous canopy at the other site. But this is a stand of Asian conifers of some sort right above Torreya nucifera from Japan. Here's another Torreya nucifera, Japanese Torreya. This one does not look as healthy as the first one we found. This is in a very different part of the garden. Let's take a top-down look at it. It's protected by a deer fence here, but I don't see much in the way of vegetative growth here. Certainly no vegetative break. I see some buds. Again, this would have been a rooted branchlet. But look at the color here, kind of yellowed out, browned out in some places. I would consider this stressed. I would guess sun scar. I've seen this before. And also you can see that it's not the sort of yew-like flat branching, horizontal leaflet branching pattern, but it's more kind of filling out up and down the whole whorl of a branchlet. I've seen this in California Torreya in full sun. Let's take a look at what we've got here. This is the first place I've seen them plant a Torreya genus in truly full sun. I'll flip the camera up, but you're not going to see anything because that is just full clouds there. And let's take a little view of what we have around us. So there's a Torreya nucifera, and you can just see some conifers around here in various stages of health, various kinds here. But there is no shade, summer or winter, no shade. And so unless this plant gets water or some kind of assistance, I think this is a good sign that the Torreya is just too stressed here. Now the best growth is coming out of this. You can see that there's multiple stems, and not quite vertical, certainly not terminals, but acting sort of like a halfway between a horizontal branch and a terminal, coming up with green stems. So they had good growth here last year, but nothing coming out right now. So let's go on and see if we can find a couple more taxifolia specimens, probably from us via Lee Barnes, in the furthest corner of the Arboretum. Brief interlude here at the Dawes Arboretum. Bald cypress, doing very, very well here in central Ohio. There you can see the characteristic knees in swampy areas, and it's off the road here. You can see it probably gathers some water. The last Torreya nucifera we saw was up there somewhere. But here's a beautiful example of, if you plant it, it will grow. Torreya of Taxodium, a bald cypress, is native to the southeastern United States, a long, long way from central Ohio, but doing just fine. Here's the final specimen of genus Torreya here at the Dawes I was looking for. This one, Torreya taxifolia, you see it's from Lee Barnes, and this one is quite odd. Let's take a look at the side first. You can see the different growth in the whorls we had there, maybe 5 inches lower down, maybe 4 inches there, and then the topmost area, maybe 2 inches, it's green, and then with a whorl starting out of it. Let's take a look top down at what we've got here. Okay, there we have it. First thing to notice as we scan around, not a single lateral vegetative bud that I see expanding or recently expanding. It's just hanging in there. It's doing absolutely no new growth around any of the peripherals, okay? Let's hone in here. It looks like it's a single stem, grown from seed, so it has a terminal, a horizontal, vertical capacity. Let's take a look top down. What's interesting here is we have a nice little green terminal growth there. You can see in the center, so it's going to be popping up. And the immediate whorl there, you see some nice long needles and a couple branchlets out. Looks pretty good. But as we look out, we've got dying needles happening here. I can't tell whether it's sun scald or whether this was such an exposed site that it got more of the polar vortex, minus 15 degrees or so during the last 2 winters when the jet stream was going crazy here, bringing the polar down into the eastern USA. Not healthy looking. So let's take a look at the surrounds and see if we can detect anything from the environment that might be causing the tree trouble in growing, at least compared to the really healthy ones, the first 2 we saw underneath the great white oak. Lots of shade in the summer. So here's what we have. We are in a stand of what looks to me like white pine. There you can see. Here's the parking area of the road. There's the lake out there at Dawes. There's another pine. I think these sure look like, the trunks look like white pine to me. So these would be native here. So we're in a pine grove. Let's look straight up here. So here's what we have. It's about noon, so the sun is, you can see it's right over there, and here we are here, mid-May. So we do get shelter from the midday sun quite a bit. You can feel it here. It's just quite shady here. Also not much sun in the wintertime, just because of how we're beneath a white pine grove. Now, I would not guess that white pines were not good for this, but we're also very exposed to winds here. And I know from our Cleveland area, the combination of very cold weather with winds, this is the windiest part that I've felt, can make a difference for the survival of the branchlets during severe cold, kind of desiccation happening, very disruptive. And the road on the south side is just off the edge there. So this is kind of an enigma. I'll take one more top down on it in case somebody wants to study this in future years. And thinks they might have an idea of what the problem is, but you're going to see there's just absolutely no vegetative growth coming out of these horizontal areas. The least damaged certainly are the most recent growth, but not healthy. But again, Torreya taxifolia, it is a survivor. It is a survivor, and if it ends up that it's having too much trouble here with what's happened recently, you can bet it will send up another basal stem. But there's still hope. The one place it's going to be growing this year is straight out of the terminal, not putting any more into the horizontal this year, and so maybe it'll really ramp up there and get another chance to grow. We shall see. So that's it for Dawes Arboretum. Torreya Guardians supplying several specimens from seed donated by the Biltmore Gardens, and fortunately having the contrasting Asian, two of them, the grandis from China, Torreya grandis from China, and the Torreya nucifera from Japan. Thank you, Dawes Garden. Lots of experimentation going on here. Beautiful collection of conifers.